Chris Mannix for the crossover alongside Michael Shapiro and Howard Beck. Guys, the Chicago Bulls made waves at the trade deadline, acquiring all-star Nikola Vucevic in exchange for a couple of players and 2 first-round picks. But so far, the return's not so good. The Bulls have lost 4 of their first 5 in games Vucevic has played. So, Michael, are you worried this could have been a bad move for the Chicago Bulls?
Well, I'm not going to let this kind of 5-game stretch necessarily dictate how I feel about the trade, but I do think that there is some reason for concern and skepticism whether this will be a worthwhile move for the Bulls. Now, I guess a lot of this, right, is how you determine what worthwhile is. If ownership wants to have a couple play-in appearances over the next few years, maybe, reach a 6 seed, maybe win one series. Sure, I think that Nikola Vucevic is probably a worthwhile acquisition. But when you're looking towards a bigger picture and this franchise actually returning to any semblance of title contention, any semblance of really proving to be a threat to win the East, this trade isn't going to do it. Vucevic, he's a very strong player. He's also a center who's 30 years old. Zach LaVine might command $190 million sooner than later. I don't necessarily buy that Chicago is some massive free agent destination like Brooklyn, New York, or either LA team. So if Chicago wants to tread water, fine. I'm not going to kill them for it. But ultimately, I think sacrificing these assets for, a 30-year-old center alongside an unproven co-star, I don't really buy that that was the shrewdest move.
Well, let's start with this. Yeah, they lost 4 of their first 5 with Vooch, who, by the way, put up good numbers in those games. But they had lost 8 of their previous 12 before he got there. So the problem isn't Nikola Vucevic. The problem is Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen and Kobe White and the rest of the guys they already had. Now, it's not to say they're bad players, but they were a bad team before he got there. Vucevic on his own was never going to turn the Bulls into a top-tier team in the Eastern Conference. Now, nevertheless, that one win with Vooch was against the Nets, granted without James Harden, but still a quality win. They reformatted the way they played a little. They started going more through the post, more through Vucevic. They're using him as both playmaker and scorer. Give them some time, I think, to acclimate to this big new piece that they're now trying to incorporate before we start to judge this trade, which, by the way, he's also got another couple of years after this. And I think this was as much of a short/long-term play as it was about this season.
Okay, beating the Durantless and Hardenless Nets was not a quality win. It was a quality name on your resume, but that's not a quality win, Howard. I'm sorry. But, all right, one guy, Kyrie, and a bunch of other guys that are on that team. My issue is not trying to win now. I embrace that. I think the Miami Heat have shown there is value in that, in establishing a winning culture. I also think it was important to show a 26-year-old guy like Zach LaVine that you are trying to win. So that's number one. The issue that I have with this deal is giving up the 2021 first-round pick. Because acquiring Vucevic and a player of his caliber, it's going to take some time to incorporate him into the mix. There's going to be an adjustment period. And in this bizarro season, where there's virtually no practice time and games are sandwiched together and you only have 20-some-odd games after the trade deadline. That, to me, just doesn't seem like enough time to get the full experience of what those two players are going to look like. And because of that, you might wind up forking over a top 10 pick in what is projected to be a loaded draft. So if they, Howard, had just given up a 2022 first and a 2024 first, I might have been more on board with this deal, even with the results we've seen so far. But because I think there are going to continue to be growing pains with the Chicago team is trying to figure out how to play with each other, giving up that 2021 pick, that could loom as a big mistake.
No, Chris, I think you do make a great point here, which is not so much the substance of what they got back, but about what they sent out, that there is absolutely more risk. And maybe that's all Orlando would have done. Like maybe that was the risk that they were banking on to make it worthwhile for them. But yeah, the 2021 pick is the one that has the possibility of backfiring on them. On the other hand, Chris, they're already in play-in range. They're 10th, and so they're in the play-in tournament as of today. They've still got a chance to get to that 7th, 8th range. And when you look at that section of the Eastern Conference, it's not like there's any world beaters in there. I mean, by definition, right? But especially in the Eastern Conference, 7 through 10 are all going to be teams that are hovering around 500 or below, and those are beatable teams. Could the Bulls play their way from the 9th, 10th slot into 8th place to be in the playoffs proper? Yeah, they could. And if they are, then they're not in the lottery. And even if they finish somewhere slightly below that, it's probably still not a top 10 pick. It's somewhere between 11 and 14. So I'm not overly concerned with this pick backfiring, but in a deep draft, you never know.
Yeah, I mean, look, if they finish in that teen range, okay, you can probably justify it. But if they finish inside the top 10 and Orlando winds up drafting a difference maker that could have been in Chicago, that could have been growing with Zach LaVine and the other young members of that team, we might be looking at this a few years from now and wondering, did they make some kind of mistake? For more, check us out over at SI.com.